Hi, my name is John Hooms. I am the CEO and Artistic Director for the Nashville Opera, and I want to welcome you to our continuing series of HBCU Masterclasses. This is our December class. It is the final one of this year. We have more classes coming up in the spring, one each month. I want to mention today our project partners. So I want to thank them for being great partners. Tennessee State University, Dr. Robert Elliott, head of the music department, Fisk University, and the 105 Voices of History Choir, made up of singers from each one of the historically Black colleges and universities in our nation. I also want to give a thanks to our sponsors for these master classes. And so please, I hope you'll join me in thanking the National Endowment for the Arts, Opera America Innovation Grant, and the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation, South Arts, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. So they are making this possible, and we want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. I also want to say a thank you to Patrick Daly, who is our project manager. And thank you, Patrick, for everything you have done in helping this all come together. Today's topic is about graduate school. And we have two wonderful teaching artists with us today, and so we can have a great conversation. And as the students here know, that once we get started, please, if you have a question, either just raise your hand or write it in the chat. It's probably easier to raise your hand so we'll get it in order. And Patrick and I will both look at you and look for you and make sure we have it in order. First of all, please welcome, if you would, our first teaching artist, which is Carl DuPont, DMA. He's a vocalist equally engaged in performing, teaching, and research, whom I love this, Carl. The South Florida Classical Review has celebrated for his dramatic dark tones, which is what you want for that. His major operatic credits include productions at the Glimmerglass Festival, Columbus Opera, Opera Carolina, Opera Saratoga, Cedar Rapids Opera, Opera Company Brooklyn, among a number of others. He has performed with many of the world's leading orchestras in performance across the United States, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia under batons of conductors such as Riccardo Muti and Zubin Mehta. Recently appointed at the Peabody Institute of Johns Hopkins University, he has developed and now teaches a course on African-American art song composers. So please join Carl DuPont. Thank you so much for being here, Carl.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And our next teaching artist is Penelope Bitzas. She is a mezzo-soprano. She is also an associate professor of music and voice at Boston University, and she has been on the faculty at Boston University since 1993. In 2007, she received the prestigious Metcalf Award, which is Boston University's highest honor for excellence in teaching. She received her Bachelor of Music in Vocal Performance and Music Education from Ithaca College, magna cum laude, and the Master of Music in Voice Performance from the New England Conservatory of Music. She has performed in a wide variety of musical genres, including opera, contemporary music, solo recital, orchestral performances, and Greek music. As a frequent performer of new music, as well as Greek music, she has been heard at Alice Tully Hall, Merkin Hall, Jordan Hall, and a number of other venues. Her students have been accepted into the Lindemann program at the Met, recipients of the San Francisco Opera Adler Fellowship, the McAllister Awards, and the Montreal Competition, among many others. So please welcome Penelope Bitzas. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't we start? And my first question is this is a special masterclass we are doing, and it was a requested masterclass, and we've had a masterclass on auditioning and on repertory. This is about graduate school and the next step in your education. So Carl, if you don't mind, let me just start with you. The big question is, why graduate school after you finish your bachelor's? What about that next step, or should you take that next step?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I encourage all students to really take time and think about what they want before deciding on to pursue a degree in graduate school, or B, exactly where they want to do it. The time that you pursue a master's in music or any graduate program is really about more intense study without the broad education that you get in an undergraduate career, where you are looking at lots of music history, lots of music theory, among oral skills and all those other things. It's the time to use those skills for a very specific purpose. And it's important for students to have identified what purpose that will be. I also think it's a time to have more of a close connection with a voice teacher, to kind of build that relationship and get a better feeling of exactly how they can take what they've learned and apply it to a career. The master's degree is kind of, right now it ends up being the step right before young artist programs or while doing young artist programs. So you have one foot in the career realm and then foot in academia, and you're trying to get the best of both worlds before you are pushed out into the world. John,
You did. Penelope, what are you have feelings on this as well? Because I'm sure you teach both levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think it can be a mixed decision for people. I have some graduate students who are really young, 21, right out of undergrad, in graduate school, and they're ready to do some things, but not as much as they might like to do just yet. So their work in the graduate program gives them a chance to stay super focused on developing their technique and a new relationship with a new teacher to get them ready for the next step of maybe getting into a YAP. But sometimes if they're really still on the young side and not quite ready, those 2 years mean they might not get as much performance experience were they to have taken a gap year off. So there are both sides of that argument about should I go right away or should I not? I think a lot of people really like and need and thrive in the structure of an academic schedule. But like what Carl mentioned as well, this theory and music history and piano class and it's not just get up and sing either, so there's still a fair amount of academics along with courses that are related to singing, in particular opera and art song repertoire.
Okay. I'll wait to anybody have a question, but before that, let me ask, what should a student look for in a grad school? Is there any special thing, if I want a performance degree, for instance, is there something I should look for, or certain schools I should look toward?
Well, I guess I'll kick off with that. If you are looking for a degree in performance, you want to make sure that there is a place where you can perform. So you want to check out the kind of performing opportunities that are available at the schools that you're looking at, and look at some of their past productions. Lots of schools are putting videos of their productions online now. So you can check out and see what the production values are, what the repertoire is. Oftentimes, certain directors have a certain predilection for Mozart or Puccini. And if you think that this is a place that is doing the repertoire that you want to sing, well, you can really, really find a good match that way. I also think the relationship between a voice teacher and a student is paramount. It is so important. And it's like any relationship, you have to go on a few dates. You have to kind of figure out, what's this thing. And I encourage you to take a lesson with the prospective teacher and really talk to the teacher, because there are lots of times when you'll just need to talk and have that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Would you like me to chime in on that?
Sure.
Okay. So ditto exactly what Carl said. I think I would put the pick the teacher as the top of that list. And I would advise definitely having some trial lessons. And I always tell people to see if there's at least one or two teachers you might be really comfortable with if the school matches what you like in terms of performance opportunities and venues. I think what Carl said about looking at production values is really a great idea. And I think nowadays most schools are also doing modern repertoire, 20th and now 21st century repertoire. And I think that's really an important component now in graduate studies for singers to also have that along with the canon. So I think that's important to look at. And you have to decide, do you want to be in a big city that has other great music around you? Or do you want to just be someplace where you can just be, the school is great and that's not important to you? And whether you want to be a big fish in a little pond or vice versa, or you want the challenge of being around a lot of different kinds of singers, which I think is equally as important. So I think those are other things to look at as well. And really find out what your performance opportunities and non-voice training options are as well.
I ditto everything Penelope just said, and to expound upon that, if you think about grad school as being the first step towards a professional career, you also want to think about where that school is and where your network will be. If you want to be on the East Coast and you want your career to be there, well, you'll be making connections with people while you're in grad school, and you'll want to kind of be over close to where that is. Now, this isn't a given. It doesn't have to be that way. But if you can use it as the beginning of networking, it will be very helpful for you.
And networking is very helpful. I cannot stress networking enough about who you meet and who you get to work with. Is true. Patrick, do you wish to add, have you anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, they're saying everything that, you know, that I was told and that I would tell them, even in this process, you know, looking at those spaces and kind of to Carl's point, and also to Penny's point, Penelope's point too. I'm sorry, I'm excited. That's my teacher. So, excuse me. But, you know, to both of those points, figuring out the space that you're in, that network is going to be really, really key. You know, also, even with the teacher, the type of relationship that you have with your teacher will also be a huge help in your own career. So having a good personal relationship, but also professional relationship that, you know, that teacher is able to say, oh, I know this person's work. I also know this person's ethics, and I know who they are as a good person, is that can lead you towards some opportunities as well. And just, you know, I know a number of singers who went to school on the East Coast, or whether on the West Coast or in the Midwest or down south further, and then they moved up to New York or somewhere along the East Coast or vice versa and all of that, you know. But again, the networks are going to be key. So if you know someone who went there who also was a friend of so-and-so's, you know, it's always just good overall just to be good to people in general. Just be good. Be a good person, be a good musician, show up, be prepared. And it's usually pretty good from there.
True. Does anybody have any questions for our teaching artists? Do you have any questions about okay, Ms. Stone.
Hello. My question is, what is some advice you could give to like those younger graduate students, or potentially like us, for example, that are still like in undergrad, not shy away from the rigor, because I know a lot of people are turned off when it comes to the rigor of specifically music programs and graduate programs. So like how, I know it can be an easy answer, but sometimes there needs to be, you know, mental preparation as well as physical preparation, you know, now as we're preparing for our own undergrad recitals and stuff.
Okay.
Sure, I'll go. I think by the time you hit your junior year, you're going to be in the groove of getting ready for the future. you know, because you start doing recitals, you're almost done taking theory classes, and you're moving towards maybe some more performance opportunities as you're finishing up your school. And I personally, my experience was I got 2 degrees in my undergrad, one in music ed and voice performance, which I did in a shorter time than I was supposed to, because I was head in theory and I could get out faster. So I did. But I have to say, I found graduate school infinitely easier than my undergraduate study. And I'll tell you why. Because I had so many things to do as an undergraduate voice major. You know, voice majors in undergraduate study have so many components. You've got theory and music history, and you've got diction, and you've got piano, and you have all your non-music requirements. And it's a lot of classwork, and more than other majors, like if you're just an English major. They have a lot of work, but we have more work. So we have to become really good at time management and being super organized. And I think if you get that going in your undergraduate studies, by the time you go to graduate school, it's going to be much easier, because you're not going to be taking 7 or 8 different classes all the time. You're still going to have to take theory and music history. So those skill classes are not always classes that everybody loves. And I understand that. But to be honest with you, you want to be the best musician you can be as a singer. You really, really do. There's so many singers in the profession. And if someone can pick someone they know they're rock solid with their learning and preparation, they're going to hire them in a heartbeat. And you want to be one of those people. So think of it as like learning to run a marathon. First, you walk around the block, then you walk around the block faster, then you start running. And so with all those skill classes that you might not love, I would embrace them and do as well as you can in them. So then graduate school, it just becomes something that reinforces that to make you a much better musician, which makes you much more marketable in the future. And I think that's the way to look at it as you go forward.
I completely agree. And I always tell my students, when we're in a lesson, and sometimes we get to one of those measures that we have to do 15, 16 times, and we break it down, and we do it on vowels, and we do it on maybe a semi-occluded vocal tract posture, and then we put the consonants back in, and then we intone it, and then we talk about, if you can enjoy that type of rigor and discipline, I always tell them, this type of very meticulous work is the type of work that one does over the course of their career. And it's the type of work that really separates the elite artists from the artists. And if you can enjoy that, then you can really enjoy this career. And it won't matter whether you're singing at the Met, or whether you're singing at Florida Lyric, or whether you're singing at anywhere, you'll be able to derive joy and fulfillment from the process. And so in that way, I think the rigor is helpful and is a training, is an important part of the training. And in the space of school, so in undergrad, and in the graduate program, you get to do that with someone else. Later on in the career, you're on your own doing it, and you have to come up with your own ideas and use the skills that you learned in order to propel you forward. So I think that if you can learn to love it and learn to enjoy it, then you can find inspiration.
Can I add on to that for a second? I just want to say, when you said the word process, I think that's the magic word, because I think learning is a process. And I think we have to have a process for how we learn. We all learn differently. Like, I'm not visual at all. I have students who are visual, so I have to adjust my teaching process for them, and vice versa. But you want to develop your system for how you approach your music with the rigor and the skill that you're going to get now and in the future. And then from there, you also want to think about, along with that, your artistic process. So how you're going to develop yourself as an artist and a communicator. And those two things actually end up being the same thing later on as you put them together. And I think it's process forever.
No, I agree. And let me add too, I agree so much, Penelope, that you want to be as the best musician you can possibly be.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing you can hone at grad school. I was doing a show a few years ago, and I had a young singer right out of Indiana University, and we were doing The Girl of the Golden West. And he played a bad guy, and he is drug on stage, he is beaten up, he's thrown to the ground, and then he has to sing. And he hits the ground, he has a beat, and then he has to sing. And he never missed it. He was always dead on, even after being beat up by the chorus and hitting the ground, he always came in at the right time. And I remember, and I used him later because of this in other roles, because you could tell that musicianship was so tight. And he was also obviously counting his head off inside, but you remember things like that. And he was a great musician.
Was that Jose Castro? Was that the role?
Yeah, yes, it is.
That was my debut with Opera Carolina, and there's nothing like being drug out on stage, beaten up, and then like catching the beat and jumping and singing. It's so tough.
It is tough. And Puccini, in his wisdom, wrote that role so hard because you're just jumping in every now and then. So it takes a wonderful musician to be able to do it, for sure. That's true. Alexandra, you have your head up. Your hand up, sorry.
We were, discussing being the best musician that you can be. And I wanted to add like some of the things that don't directly tie into musicianship, but how much does physical and mental health play into your ability to deliver as a singer? And what are some of your experiences with the highs and low of either one? And what is your advice for us going into grad school as musicians and like keeping ourselves together through the rigor that we're talking about, that we were just discussing?
Oof, this is deep. Penelope?
Yeah, sure, I'll take it. A couple of things I would say. In terms of the physical aspect of it, singing is really athletic in so many ways. I think the best way to think about it is that you want to be in good health and physically fit so that you can sing all the time, so that you can move on stage and not get tired. And so whatever that is for you, you have to figure that out, what your physically fit is, so that you're not tired after you do a long rehearsal. You'll be tired anyways, but if you're not good physical shape, you'll be super exhausted. So I think it's about wellness and health and wellness. For me, it's not about weight and size. It might be for somebody else, but for me, it's just about health and wellness. So I would say you have to figure out, are you going to be someone who walks? Are you going to be someone who stretches before they sing? Find your bliss and what makes your body the machine that helps you sing really well and not be tired. In terms of the other aspect, the emotional and mental aspect of it, the profession is really tough. It has great highs and sometimes really great lows. Like right now, it's a pretty great low for a lot of people. I know some people who are in their late 40s who've had really wonderful careers, who had lots of work coming up, and now they don't have anything. So it can be very challenging. I think what's important is to remember that you're a person who sings and who is an artist and who communicates. And I don't think you want to take on the moniker of I'm a singer and that's who I am as a person, because I think that can be tricky in days like today. I think it's important to know who you are and be authentic in who you are and comfortable with that, and let that be part of who you are as an artist, but not all of who you are as an artist.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I can say I didn't know who I was when I started this journey. And through the different stations and through the different opportunities, a clearer picture developed. And that might be your experience as well, because you're maturing not at the same time as your voice. You're maturing as a person, your voice is maturing, and sometimes those things are going together. Sometimes one gets ahead of the other. And so it can be a tricky process. The thing that I have learned, if I've learned anything, is being prepared to adjust and learning how to surf in the transitions. So when I was your guys' age, I, had the exact blueprint of everything that I wanted and how it should happen. And it was tough for me when things didn't happen exactly that way. But along the way, I started just to figure out how to adapt and adjust and roll with the punches, and that became very helpful. I completely agree with what Penelope was saying about the process and and the regimen. You have to learn what your body needs. So one of the hardest thing for young singers to understand is allergies are not an excuse. Or I didn't get sleep, that's not an excuse. Or the train was late, it's not an excuse. None of these hold water in the professional realm. So you have to understand, one, how those trains run, so you can make sure you're there on time no matter what the I carry a bag of lotions and potions with me wherever I go. So whatever my body's doing when I get off that plane, I can adjust it accordingly so we can get back to singing well. And it takes time to figure that out, but that's an important part of the process. And you can also really focus on that in grad school. As far as the mental health is concerned, I always tell my students, you have to be your best cheerleader. I used to think that if I beat myself up about everything and just got really frustrated, that it would help me to get to where I needed to go faster. And that turned out not to be the case. You have to nurture yourselves because the career won't always do it. And if it does, sometimes it can do it in a destructive way. So like Penelope was saying, if you know yourself and you can walk off out of a lesson and say, okay, I did X, Y, and Z well, I'm going to work on A, B, and C. That's going to be a much more, you'll be closer to homeostasis, and you won't have those swings and those highs and lows from the compliments or the criticism. You'll be able to take them and be able to adjust. One of the things I'm starting to, I read this really great book last summer called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's not about music at all. It's about trauma. And through reading this book, I'm starting to realize that there are many traumatic elements about the career that we haven't really started addressing yet. We saw a little bit of it with the Me Too movement. But even then, if you noticed, opera departments were late in addressing it. And we saw some things recently about the movement for Black lives, but again, it's late. And so if you start to develop the skills to be able to deal and to be able to recognize what you need and what's going on and how to interpret these situations around you, then you can protect your own mental health. In the end, you end up being the person who has to protect your own mental health and make assessments about the situation. Am I safe? Is this place safe? Do I need to get out of the situation? Do I need to talk to someone? And so it just takes a lot of self-care and self-knowledge and persistence.
If I could chime in really quickly on that, all of ditto to both of those things, but also to kind of give a further point. One thing that a lot of us would do as young singers and singers in general is that if we have an audition coming up, we want to be like, we're putting everything into that audition. We're looking at schools. They're like, I want to go to this school, and it's all about that. And your whole energy is into that. To what Penelope was saying, you're a person who sings. So your world is not over if that doesn't go well, if that's not great, if you didn't sing, you sang the audition, you did your part. Just go on. And I was basically wrote down, don't put all your eggs in that basket, like your mental eggs into that full basket. And the other side too, is having sort of to keep your mind of like having a process and a practice. So for instance, and Penelope can also speak to this, I was somebody who liked to work out, but that was also my practice. That was not about singing. That was for me. So it was just, even whether or not it turns out anything, it's just for me. That makes me feel better, right? So that's my practice to feel better about other things. So having a non-interest, a non-performance interest, or a non-singing or opera interest, or having community, having friends who are not necessarily singers, having people that you're around who may not do this. They can support you and love you through it, but they may not do this, and so you can have some escape and have some other ventures. So yeah, those are things.
Ms. Hinton, you have your hand up.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So I just wanted to say, in regards to the grad school, I've been thinking about going to grad school a lot more recently. I was not a music major in undergrad, and I just recently graduated. And early on, I honestly thought that I didn't need to be a music major in undergrad in order um, to get what I needed in order to get into grad school. But then I started watching master classes and doing a little research, and even got the chance to actually become a part of a master class. And I realized there was a little bit more that I could do to hone my skills before jumping up and trying to audition for grad school. And then I realized grad school was really good preparation for other things. And I know Mr. Carl DuPont said that it's a good way to get your foot in the door before getting into young artist program. And just recently, I considered young artist programs. So I guess I wanted to ask, one, now that I'm out of undergrad and have the skills that I do have and still want to do undergrad, is it still worth going for grad school? And two, jumping in, trying to get my foot in the door for grad school to get in a young artist program, is that the order that I should take, getting into grad school before jumping into a young artist program? Or is it safe to just try and go for a young artist program? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would suggest that the skills that you get in graduate school will help prepare you for the Young Artist Program auditions. And lots of the directors of these Young Artist programs take notes. So you may not get in the first year that you audition, but they will take a note of your preparation, of your performance. And if they liked you, when you apply again, you'll be granted an audition. If you were not liked, and it's nothing personal, but if they thought, well, the skills here just aren't there, then you might not be granted an audition the second time. So I think for that reason, it's always good to go with the as best prepared as you can be for the auditions. And I think graduate school is helpful for that, but it's not the only way. There are lots of singers out there that don't do grad school, but they have the skills. So the most important thing is how you plan on making sure that you have the skills and in order to present your best self.
I would agree with that completely. I think if you're in a grad program and you decide you want to do it, audition for young artist programs, that's a conversation you have with your teacher. And your teacher will say, okay, you can do these auditions, but maybe not these auditions. Or you might even need to wait a year. I mean, sometimes that happens. So that's one part of that conversation. I do think the other thing, there are two other things I want to say in regards to this, is that not everybody goes to grad school to get an MM in voice performance. But like what Carl said, they have others, their skill set is pretty good and they're singing really well and at a high level, so they don't need it. Or what happens is some people are really, there are those people who are super self-motivated and can do all that study and work on their own. But that means they have to be really organized. Like they have to have a teacher, they've got to have a coach, they've got to do it regularly. They've got to, get all that information that they would get in graduate school on their own. And that can be challenging for someone to do, but it's not necessarily for everyone. And you have to really think about that. The other thing I want to say is, this is like a personal thing that's kind of driving me crazy in the world, because I run a program for gifted high school singers at Tanglewood in the summer. And we get kids who audition and they say, well, what do you do? I'm an opera singer. I'm like, no, you're 14, you're not an opera singer. Okay. So there's sort of this thing that if you're a singer now, you're an opera singer. So what I want to dispel is that's the only thing you can do. And I love opera and I have lots of students who sing it. But not everybody makes their career that way either. So I don't think you should limit yourself in what you look at. And the way the business is right now, everybody has to do everything. They have to sing opera, they have to sing oratorio if their voices lend itself to that. And a lot of people still can make a living in some places doing choral singing and small ensemble singing. So I think you should keep all those doors open as you go ahead. I'm not saying don't pursue opera, because we all love that art form, but it's not for everybody either. So you have to really keep that thinking open about, what do I really want to do as a singer? And that also will help you decide what you do about grad school and on all the rest of it.
Thank you. I see, let's see. And really quickly too, well, actually, no, we're gonna keep going. I see Shauna, you raised your hand. So we have Shauna Lewis here.
Hello. I wanted to ask, I know you guys mentioned that we should build good relationships with our vocal coaches and our teachers. And I know a lot of times I've seen other people have damaged voices from different teachers, and they haven't received the best education in teachers because they didn't know what to look for. So my question to you guys is, what should we look for in a vocal coach? What should we look for? How could we be more self-aware with our voices, and how should we know like what we need going into performance and artistry?
Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Uh,
I'll go. It's fine.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, so that's sort of a tricky one in a variety of ways. But what I would say is this, is that to thine own self be true. So if you're taking lessons with somebody and you feel you're getting worse instead of better, you need to pay attention to that. Okay. Now, sometimes when you're changing your technique, you might go through a period where things seem sort of unsure, because it's a transition from one thing to something new. So that might not be a terrible thing. That might be positive. But if you find you're getting vocally tired all the time, if you find that your throat hurts, if you find weird things are happening, like your high voice doesn't feel right and you can only sing in your chest voice, and things just don't feel vocally healthy, then that's a sign you need to look at where you are, and maybe you need to be with somebody else. I think most voice teachers want to do the best thing for their students, and every single one of them has a different idea about what that is and how to go about it, to be sure. And some people like a sound that's super heady, and some people like a sound that's got more chest predominance in it, and it changes from person to person. And it may be that your voice doesn't really need what that teacher focuses on. So that may be another thing to think about. I think they're just basic components of singing that you want to think about. You have to have really good posture. You have to have some kind of a breathing mechanism. It's got to feel like it's a buoyant sound, that you can sing for fairly long periods of time without fatigue, that your range is expanding all the time. Those are kinds of the things you can look at to help you decide that. And yes, some people do get into trouble, and you have to just really be the caretaker of your two little vocal folds. So if it doesn't feel good, you need to have a conversation with your teacher. And if it continues to be a problem, then you might have to do something else. And I also just want to mention this too, in terms of the teacher-student relationship. You could have two voice teachers who teach exactly the same information, but their style of teaching or personality doesn't work well with you. And sometimes that can make you get off the road with your singing just because you're not a good personality match. So you have to know that too. And that's our, at least if you have a lesson with somebody, you get a sense, oh, we're really going to get along. I feel that I can communicate with this person, because that's a lot of it, that like Carl mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to communicate, being able to say, oh, well, this week I've been feeling this way, and having that conversation. The power dynamics can be tricky, and you might feel as a student, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this, or maybe I shouldn't explain this. But that's kind of the opposite of what we want to hear as voice teachers and what you need as a voice student. And I always tell my students, I keep saying, and I always say, but you can't let anyone take away something they didn't give you. And so if you come in with a great high register and that thing works, and that starts to not work anymore, then you have to just perk up and pay attention, because like Penelope was saying, you are the custodian of what happens there. And communication is such a funny thing. Sometimes someone hears or interprets something other than what is said. So it's very easy for messages to get mixed in the studio and in the career. So you kind of have to just go the extra mile to make sure that you protect what's yours, make sure that you're hearing the right things. And then, a great place is studio class. Listen to a bunch of singers and see how that information is dispensed, and double check. Oh, is that what I thought that I heard? Is that what I understood? Or, oh, that's what they meant. It can really be enlightening.
Good. Alexandria, you have a question?
Yeah, I kind of want to go off of that question. It's basically like in grad school, like once you get in grad school, you'll come across a lot of different voices. And I was wondering, is there such thing as the perfect opera voice? Is there value in, for lack of a better word, timbre or quality? Not really timbre, but quality. Like you have some people who have those beautiful, clear voices. Are there opportunities for individuals whose voices are maybe a bit raspier or airier in opera? What are the myths and what is the truth when it comes to your kind of voice in opera? And confidence there is what I'm trying to get to. Mm-hmm.
That is a whole other topic, and that's a really, really deep well. I actually do research in that area, voice as the technology of selfhood. And I stole that phrase from colleague Nina Sun Aichim out at UC Berkeley. There are, as many people are in this room, there are as many opinions about voices, and you have your own opinions. When you listen to opera singers, is there a particular singer or type of voice that you really just love listening to?
I really enjoy the deeper female voices on all occasions, like the ones that just kind of rumble, but they still have that feminine quality. I love it. That's my favorite. But my voice isn't like that necessarily. It's interesting, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, but we all have our predilections, and they are colored by what we grew up with, what we were first introduced with, maybe the first deep, low voice that we heard. There's so many other associations that come with singing. I think the most important thing for a singer to develop is ease, and then projection. And you don't have to have a big voice to project, but you do have to project in order to have a career, because you got to be heard. So I'll stop there so I don't ramble, but that's a deep topic.
Penelope, do you want to add on to that?
I can, I guess. I would say this. I think there's room for all different kinds of voices in singing. And I think what's really important is that you develop your voice and your unique sound. And I think that's what's most important, to be distinctive with what your voice is.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah, Ms. Stone, go ahead.
So I have a question about the entrance exams for the graduate schools, the GREs. So how did you guys prepare for that and, go about, funding? Because I know that's different from when we were starting undergrad and we could get waivers and stuff, but that's different from the research I've seen. So how did you all prepare for the GREs and also the auditions at the same time?
So most music schools do not require the GREs, and the ones that did don't. There may be some that still do, but most don't. What usually happens at grad school is there is a skills test at the beginning where you are tested on oral skills, music theory, music history, in order to determine what classes you need to take or if there's any remediation. Please take those very seriously, because if you end up needing remedial courses, then that will eat up a lot of the time that you want to be spending practicing and learning roles and performing and going to auditions. So I always encourage students to, that summer in between, before you start grad school, just really study. And it's worth it to hire a tutor, especially if you're looking at the price of the classes. If you can hire a tutor over the summer and make sure that you can notate any melody that anybody plays and sing any melody that someone puts in front of you, it'll totally be worth it, and it'll be a great way to start grad school.
Right, I would tag along with that and find out what entrance exams you actually have to take once you get there, because every school is different. So you'll probably have to take a theory test. You'll probably have to take a music history test. You'll probably have to take a piano class of some sort. So at least those three, and maybe some schools have more diagnostics than that. But figure out where your weakness is, and that's the one to hone in on, I think, the most. Like my undergraduate work had okay music history classes. They were really good in 20th century and sort of like, okay for survey classes. Nobody really likes to teach the music survey classes. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that on YouTube, but so be it. So we used to have to use this book called The History of Music by Grad. And I spent the summer for grad school. I taught music half in the morning, and then I'd go home and have lunch, and I sat on the porch and I outlined Grad. And I passed the music history test. It was not fun. I didn't really want to do it, but then I didn't have to take anything I didn't want to take. I could take what I wanted to take. And that was what was important to me. So you want to really find out what they want, what they require of you to get ready, which can lead into another conversation, I think.
Does anybody else have anything? Patrick, did you have anything? I saw you almost say something.
Yeah, it's funny. I wanted to speak to that, and then I had a question as well. But to that anecdote, I have a funny one. And again, Professor Bitzas can speak on this too. When I got to BU, I was actually not accepted into the MM. I was accepted into the performance diploma. And if I had not have taken, once I got accepted, had not have taken those diagnostic tests of the theory and the ear training and all of those other things, because I took those tests, it was able for me to easily switch my degree over to the MM. So again, that's going to be very key in knowing that stuff, having a good balance and having some good prior information, because once you do that, you can pretty much write your ticket in different ways. Your musicianship and those other skills are going to be very key. But another big question that I kind of have, and I think we're all kind of wondering, just what is the process of application? for grad school? Like, just what do you do? What is that like?
Okay, I'm willing to take it on to start at least, and then you can tag in, Carl.
Yeah.
I think you have to be really organized and methodical about approaching the grad school process. So first you want to figure out, make a list of schools you might be interested in going to. You talk to your teacher, you talk to your friends, you talk to your coaches and see who and where they recommend. And you want to have a list that varies in scope and ranking and cost. Let me mention that cost is important. So you want to make a list. You want to make a list of which schools and which teachers at those schools you might be interested in. And that's just the very beginning of it. Once you get into it after that and sort of have that narrowed down, the next thing you want to do at some point from your junior year on, I would say, is make contact with some teachers at those schools. And now that we all know how to do Zoom lessons, you don't have to travel for a lesson and spend all that money like we did before, but you might still want to see the school and to see the city. But you can, set up those lessons to see if you get along with them, see if you like their vocal information and or their style, see if you just like the feeling of the school, because sometimes at the end of the day, our decisions can also just be very intuitive. And I think, it might be a great school, but you just don't like it. That happens. And that's okay. That's what I want to say. Then after that, I would have a big spreadsheet of what each school I'm applying to, with all their requirements are, for the pre-screening. Every school is different. You really have to keep track of it. And then you want to say, okay, I need Italian everywhere. I need French everywhere. I only need one aria. Oh God, I need 4 arias. It depends. So you want to get that all really lined up and in a place where you won't lose it. And then that gets you ready for your pre-screen. So at least you know when it's due, what you're going to record, and then later on you can decide what you're going to sing when you actually get to do your audition. Do you want to talk, Carl, about making their recordings?
Oh, sure.
Huh?
But to your point, that spreadsheet is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I had a student this year applying to like 10 schools. We had all the repertoire, but then University of Michigan wanted a secco recitative. And we had done all of this. I mean, this student had like 20 songs, lots with recitatives, but none of them had a secco recitative. So then we had to go and find a secco recitative and then make sure it was really secco. It's a lot of details. And they wanted a piece written by an underrepresented composer, which was easy because I make sure that all my students have songs by Black composers. And some schools want things written since 1980, some want things written since 1990, some want things written within your lifetimes, which I know you all are young. I don't even want to know how young. So you have to keep that in mind. For the audition video, I guess I can speak like pre-COVID and post-COVID. You want to make sure that it's a really nice space, that it looks professional, because we see a lot of these videos. And what we don't appreciate all the time is that singing is an oral art, but it's also a very visual art. And a nice presentation goes a long way in allowing us to perceive a prepared and a talented applicant. But during these COVID times, of course, we understand you might not be able to do that. So do the best that you can, but definitely listen to your recordings. Does it sound too boomy? Does it sound too staticky? You have to become your own sound engineer during this process of making tapes. And if you are not happy with the take, try it again tomorrow or the day after that. You don't want to send something that is just okay if you can do something better.
I would agree with that. And I would say, don't do it the week it's due. Start way ahead of time so you don't have to do all that singing on one day and record multiple pieces, because it's daunting the first time you have to do these videos and singing. We're all getting used to it right now, but the first time you do it, it's sort of horrifying. I'll just tell you that right now. You're not going to like anything. You're not going to like how it looks. You're not going to like how it sounds. So you need to sort of adjust to how you look and sound on the camera and the video. You can make perfectly great recordings if you have a really good phone. Like iPhones are great, but other Android phones also do really good recordings as well. So you don't have to like go buy some fancy equipment to do it. I have students who've made recordings on their computers. So if you don't have one, you borrow one. That's what the kids do all the time. In fact, some of them did it this weekend for the Met auditions. They had to borrow a computer because they had used a platform that they couldn't use on their computer. So this happens all the time. But I would really practice how you're going to do it. Make sure your background is pretty neutral, not too many things. A blank wall is great if you have one. You just don't want it to be too busy or distracting. And double check where you put your microphone. Those people who talk about this sort of thing, I actually am really bad at this, but they say where the microphone is or whatever you're using is really important. And that's what you want to fuss around with before you make those recordings for school, and make sure that you can hear the piano, because sometimes the piano level is either too soft, occasionally too loud.
Let's see. Ms. Rainbow, I think you have, oh, there you are. You had your hand up.
Hi, yes. So for both of you, what are some qualities should we look for in a teacher to help us propel our career after grad school?
Well, some of the things that we've been mentioning, a teacher, so you want someone that you want to stay in touch with, because that kind of mentorship, and actually maybe that's the better thing. You want a mentor, and someone that you can reach out to after you finish your schooling, because there are a lot of decisions that need to be made. Someone that can give good advice that you can trust, and of course get like excellent vocal advice and see improvement in your voice. I text with my teacher from master's all the time. And then also from my doctorate, I studied with Costanza Kukuro for my master's and Kevin Short for my doctorate. And I just think the world of these two people, and I keep in touch with them just because I enjoy talking to them, and they're such phenomenal people. I kind of think that that's just a neat thing to have.
I would second that you want to have that kind of relationship with your teacher so that you're always in contact with them. I hear from a lot of my former students on a regular basis, which is wonderful. And it's also fun to see what people are doing and how they're handling things. But most teachers want to be that mentor for you and to help you as you go down your journey, especially once you get out of grad school, because right out of grad school, if you're not going to some other kind of year-round program, that takes some thought and planning for how you're going to utilize that time. So it's important to have people you can speak to about that. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question?
Don't be shy.
I do, if I may, I have a little soapbox that I like to get on and lecture a little bit about, and that is language and communication. So I want each of you to always know each and every word in each and every one of your pieces when you go into these auditions. If this is a place worth going to, the people across the panel or across the screen, they know what these words mean. They know what these songs are about. And if you are presenting them and you are the only one that doesn't know what these songs mean, that puts you at a disadvantage. Diction is great, but it only works when you know what the songs mean and you have something to communicate. And I see it all the time where it's clear that these are notes and these are rhythms and these are sounds, but this isn't a message. So I know it takes extra time, but I also know that nowadays there are resources that we didn't have when we were students. When I had to get a German dictionary that was about that thick and look up every word, and half of those words from Schubert were not in that dictionary because they were outdated. Same thing for Verdi, same thing for Mozart. So I really had to like search and search and search and search. And now we have IPA source, and now there's something called the Diction Police. There's so many resources out there. The other thing is that a master's program is actually kind of short. It's 2 years. And when you think about the skills that it takes to learn a language, well, you know, it takes a normal human years and years and years. How old were you before you started speaking in complete sentences? Let alone, we're talking about people when we're singing these characters that are expressing these complex ideas. So time is on your side. It's an investment that's completely worth it. Learn everything in your songs, then learn everything that everybody else is singing. Then if you can start just learning the languages just from a conversational aspect, and it will make such a difference.
I have a question. It's kind of an odd question. What kind of classes will you take? It's not an odd question. What kind of classes will you take in grad school that don't necessarily have anything like composing or writing an opera? Do you take those kinds of classes in your either master's or doctoral programs, like actually creating a work in itself? Do you take anything?
Well, we have a class that's taught by one of our comp people that's basically how to write an opera in a way. And we had someone take it who was actually a voice major in his doctoral program, because he also was a composer. He was not in school as a composer, and he didn't really study composition, I don't think, but that's why he was able to take that class. Typically, a lot of people don't take it, that kind of thing, singers, but if you have that kind of background and skill and knowledge, perhaps you can.
And there's also something in most schools called an independent study,
Right.
where if you have something that you're really interested in, you can create your own project and pursue it.
Do you get points in the industry if you do that? And by points, I don't mean like literal points. I mean kind of like points, brownie.
Well, yes, in a way. I love it when students create their own projects, because tapping into your passion is so helpful. When other people can see what you're interested in, they can start to get a feel for who you are. And so when you go into these auditions and they see on this resume, well, Alexandria has created a project in Russian art songs, and they say, oh, well, this will be great because we're planning a Russian art song festival in 2021, and we, just things like that, just to see what you're interested in. I think it's helpful. But then also for you, becoming the CEO of you and creating your own project and the project manager, and creating these projects and seeing it through from the beginning of to the end, you will develop a lot of skills, and it will be applicable to everything that you do. Because in the end, as an opera singer, you are a project manager for everything that you do, and you have to work with a timeline, and you have to work with limited resources, and you have to create a nice finished product.
Yeah, I want to tag on with that. I totally agree with that. And I think the way that you can develop your own projects are by the things that you have interests in, okay? So, for example, I had a student who is African-American. She liked to write poetry. We're trying to do her senior recital. So we developed a project for her on the first African-American sculptress whose name is Edmona Williams, if I'm remembering it right. And so she wrote all the text for it. We happen to have a playwright in the School of Theater who's African-American who I got set them up so they worked together on the works, on the words. And then she hooked up with one of the composers at school and they did this whole project around this not super well-known woman in the world that a lot of us live in, but a really incredible, it's an incredible story actually. And they wrote this piece together, which she got to do on her recital. And one section was actually all text with music, not singing, and it had several movements. It was really moving and compelling, but it really came out of something she was really interested in portraying and working on. So I think those kinds of projects can come from your interests, whatever they are. Which brings me to something else I kind of want to get on a soapbox about, if I can, is that I think you should have other interests outside of music and singing, because singing is, after all, about life. Music expresses life, or as one of my colleagues says, the human condition, which is so true. So you want to have other kinds of music you like to listen to. You want to think about what's going on in the world, and right now a lot. You want to think about what things are important to you. You want to look at art. You want to read. You want to snowboard if you want to do that. I think you want to keep all those things open to keep you being a really interesting person, which makes you a really interesting artist. So I think that's, you know, I just want to tie that into that a little bit and encourage you to do that forever.
Agree. Patrick, you have your hand up.
Yes, we have a question from YouTube, and I have to go back and find it. Give me 2 seconds. Great. Yes, we have a question from our from a Facebook viewer, Rayvon Love, asking, what if you apply to a graduate school and get accepted, but without funding, and then you decide to re-audition? Is that something that is common, or should it be avoided? And I think that also may even open up a doorway to even talk about funding opportunities within the schools or different types of schools and what that looks like. But that is their question.
That's an excellent question. Funding is such a major component, and it can determine what you can do after the career based on how you're able to fund the grad school experience. Meaning, if you end up with lots of debt, that can be tough. So I think when Penelope was talking about that large list, that's a really great reason for applying to a lot of schools, and also for having recommendations to schools and places that could really, really use you and would be happy to have you. And I think it's perfectly okay if the funding doesn't work out to wait and then try again the next year. It's an important part of the picture. And I said you're the CEO of your own business, but you're also the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and you want to make those numbers make sense. And you also have to factor in the cost of living, which is in addition to the cost of schooling. This is a very expensive career. And so we have to be very strategic about how you deploy your resources while you are on that ladder getting to the next step. One more thing, if I may, it's okay to ask for more money if the school accepts you. And that's something I didn't know. I know now that I'm on the other side of this, but please ask for more money. Explain your need, be explicit, and communicate in that way as well.
Agreed.
Yeah, Patrick, do you have anything else?
Not necessarily to that. I think that is a great point. I kind of think this question sort of bounces to expand some on Alexandria's question, which was, having interest in other areas. So can you have more than one concentration in graduate school?
Here at Peabody, we have an emphasis in pedagogy that you can add to the performance, but the master's in music is more of a specialized degree. So really, if you have another emphasis, it'll more likely take the form of having another degree. And that's not impossible or uncommon. A colleague of ours, Dr. Louise Toppin, she actually did I think she did her undergraduate in piano, and then here at Peabody, she did a master's in piano and a master's in voice.
Hmm.
Yeah, the same. It's unusual at the master's level to have a secondary concentration. Sometimes at doctoral programs, that's where you can have a secondary area.
Okay. I have a question here also about, could you talk a little about the different types of programs and degrees as far as an MM versus an MA versus an artist diploma? I know there's a little confusion just to what falls under what. I think, Carl, you were talking a little about that, about the specialized nature
Right.
of certain thing.
Yeah, so the MM is for music performance, and you will study literature as your main focus. And then we have an MA here, a master's, well, sorry, yeah, we have an MA, but it's in audio engineering. So it's more of a science degree. The DMA is for more study with a performance focus, but most DMA candidates find that they are heading into a career of teaching or scholarship in some type of way. And then the PhD is not, it's not inaccessible for vocalists. So I want to put that out there. I know I've sung with lots of people who have PhDs. It's just a little bit rarer because most of us go with the DMA. But the PhD you can do in musicology, music theory. In some places you can even do it in composition. But the scholarship requirements are going to be more. So you'll be required to do more writing and a bigger dissertation than you would in the DMA, which is more performance-based. And then we have a graduate performance diploma, which is for having that specialized study without the other academic requirements.
We have the same setup, and we also have a similar performance diploma in performance. And then we also have an Opera Institute, which is an advanced postgraduate program primarily, which is now becoming a diploma, a performance diploma. We have an artist diploma at BU, but it's like a one person. It's a one person in the artist diploma, and frequently it goes to like a violinist or pianist if we have anybody at all. So it's not lots of people. Some schools have, I think it's Cincinnati has an AD in opera and a couple of things like that, and that's more than one person for sure.
Does anybody have anything else? Any other question or any other question on YouTube, Patrick? I can't see that in case there is anything.
No, we're not getting anything at the present, and I'm also getting some of those things back. But I would also like to ask, you know, we are here with this wonderful group of beautiful young students at HBCUs, and so I would love to get some insight, or for them to hear from someone else, what are some of the things that they can improve, that they can work on being students from HBCUs, or some of those things that they have to kind of keep in balance between students that are coming from other spaces at PWIs and conservatories, coming from spaces like Tennessee State and Fisk and so on. So what are some of the things that you would recommend to these young people?
Well, so I did not go to an HBCU. However, I also did go to an HBCU because my stepdad teaches at Bethune-Cookman University. My mom is an alumna of Bethune-Cookman, and I started at Bethune kind of as a high schooler, and I was actually playing piano for their opera workshop. So I grew up there. Also, my dad's side went to FAMU, so there's the whole like rivalry there in the state of Florida. And I'll refer back to my kind of the soapbox. In my experience, there isn't always the same amount of coursework available at an HBCU because of the smaller faculty. So you might not have a diction course where you spent an entire semester on German, an entire semester on French or Italian, and you might not have had the language class either, which can be a whole year in some PWIs. So undergraduates are coming in with the diction courses and the language courses. And if you don't have that, that is something that you can remedy or you can address on your own. You can get coachings. Wherever you are, there is someone there who speaks German, who speaks French, who speaks Italian. So you can really, or if not, now, like Penelope was saying, you can Zoom. You can Zoom all the way over to Italy and have a coaching with actual Italian. So making sure that those languages are up to the standard is going to be really important for putting you on the same footing as far as preparation is concerned. And that's something that audition panels are really looking at, is preparation. Of course, all your notes need to be accurate. You want to make sure you have a wide range of repertoire. And then I also encourage my students to do something that speaks to your heart. In my undergrad, I decided I really wanted to sing some art songs by Black composers. And then, even though I was at Eastman and Sibley Music Library, they pride themselves on having the largest music library in the Western Hemisphere. They compete with Paris Conservatoire. So I thought I would be able to find scores by Black composers, no problem. It was an issue. And then when I found that 1977 anthology of Black American composers compiled by Willis Patterson, there were not a lot of songs in my range. I was a young singer, I had a limited range, I was a low voice, most of those things are for soprano. So that kind of started me on this journey of looking for things that I could sing that represented me and my identity. And that was an important part of me finding myself and finding an identity in the career. So I encourage you all to take stock of that and to create the space that you want to inhabit.
And I'd like to add on to that too, in terms of the preparation for getting ready for school. I mean, languages are really so important, and you really can find things on YouTube that can help you get even just the sound of what a native speaker sounds like in your ear, if you're not familiar, because that can be super helpful if you haven't had a lot of language study. And sometimes you can find freebie like Italian and German classes online. So I would explore those opportunities as well. And I would also think about what repertoire you want to put forth in your auditions. I think sometimes when people develop their repertoire list for school auditions, they decide, I'm going to put something in here that shows what I'm going to sound like 5 years from now. I can kind of sort of sing it. It shows that I might be able to sing it in 5 years, but I can't really sing it now. Don't do that. Do not do that. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, a girl auditioned for our grad program. She came in and sang this really hard coloratura or aria. It was really messy. It was a long time ago. It was really messy. And then she sang Care Salve by Handel. If you don't know that piece, it's really beautiful. It's lyrical. It's super exposed. Just long, beautiful line. You just get to hear the voice. And that was beautiful. And then I talked to her. And she really thought that the flashy piece was great. And I thought, that was a red light for me, because the flashy piece was horribile. It was terrible. But the beautiful Handel, just beautiful melody was gorgeous and really showed what her voice was. And that's what you want to do when you do auditions for anything, really. You want to show what you can really sing well or fairly well and consistently now. And you can have a stretch piece, but you have to be able to sing it pretty well.
I completely agree. I remember as a young singer, I had these arias that were 50-50, meaning 50% of the time I could sing well. The other 50% of the time, it could be a hot mess. And I thought that that was okay. And now I realize that that was not what you should be going in at all. So present something that, like Penelope was saying, that you consistently sing well, that you can consistently sing the high note. We all know what the high note is. We all know when it's coming. We all know how hard it is. So it's not something that you can duck and dodge. And if you don't have a list of songs and arias that you feel you can present well consistently, and every time you sing them, do reasonably well, then maybe it's appropriate to take a moment and increase your study and continue your study before applying.
Oh, that's true. I saw too, Carl, speaking of language and things, that you were going to be doing Leporello somewhere. And that is so much text and so much Italian. That is the thing that destroys so many singers if you aren't ready for that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love Leporello. And they just sent us the cuts, and they cut everybody's part except for mine. So I'm excited that I get to speak all of that text. And one of the things that I feel really lucky about in this career is that music is about literature. And I didn't quite understand that at the beginning, but I've always loved literature. And then when you get to put on another layer with another culture and another language, and you get to play around with those associations, it can be just such a rich experience. And when I lived in Germany and I worked at the Opera House in Germany, it was fun for me to go to the Opera House every day just to talk to people on the way. You can tell I'm an extrovert, but I talk to everybody on the way up to the stage, everybody after the stage, to learn all of those new traditions over there, and just to get that kind of understanding. And it's, I think it's really, really thrilling.
That's, Patrick, did you have something?
Yes, we have one more. I have another question also from Rayvon Love from Facebook, asking, is it uncommon to pursue the artist diploma before the master's in music?
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was asked, so we're going to ensure that it's because it's a good question. I think that people, and I think part of the question that also comes about for a lot of singers, you know, that we get excited. You know, we get excited about, okay, I can do this, I can go there, I can do this, and you feel like I'm ready for the Met tomorrow. Just give me a couple of years and these kind of things. And so just ensuring that, you know, and as they have already spoken to, the MM is going to be very concentrated. It's going to give you more than just the performance skills. The diploma is going to be purely about the singing. And I often kind of see the diploma as sort of a gestation period. So you've done your master's, you've done your undergrad degree, you've done your master's, or your undergrad study. I don't even want to say degree because some people may not actually have the degree in the field, but they've done their undergrad study, they go to their master's degree, and they are doing that. So they're getting other skills, they're getting the theory, the language, the piano, all of that, and the singing and the stage. And then if you feel like, you know, I want to stay with this teacher. So there are colleagues of ours who they finish their master's and they actually just say, let me do a diploma at that same school so I can stay with this teacher. Or I feel like I need some more time, but with a new teacher in a new space. And it's the same kind of thing. So just to get you sort of grounded, and it gives you, and I think it kind of gives you more context, and it gives you also more grounding in a community. So all of those things matter, but generally, yes, it's, as they have both said, it is uncommon to go diploma first. It would usually be undergrad, MM, and then diploma, and then you're off to the races, whatever that looks like.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? We have a few minutes left. If anybody has any other questions.
Can anybody tell us about you talked about communication and knowing the words, but what is some etiquette, some notes on etiquette for being a musician, a singer, going into auditions, like actual auditions, and then getting to know a new instructor, those type of things, just some points on etiquette.
Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So for the grad school audition process, I would say be kind and courteous to everyone you meet along the way, because our music community is so small and everybody ends up knowing everybody. And it really goes a long way to just be kind. I mean, this and to be very professional, show up on time, know your notes, know your music, know your translation. I often say there are people in this world that sing better than me, but there will be no one who shows up to any gig being more prepared than I am. I will always do everything that I can to arrive and be ready to go. And you will never catch me not knowing my words. You'll never catch me not being memorized. And lots of people in the industry respond really well to that. Because when you get to this level, everybody can sing, but so resources are limited, rehearsal time is limited. That orchestra is so expensive to get in the pit. So you want to make sure that it's someone who can, like Maestro was saying, arrive on the beat when it's their time, no matter what has happened. And someone that is always going to be at rehearsal on time. So I think just those basic etiquette ideas about professionalism apply just as much in grad school as they do in the career.
And I would add to that, that you're someone that can work with other people and be a good colleague and supportive of other singers, as opposed to, and the kind of singer who might sit around and talk about everybody else. You don't have time for that nonsense. That's just sort of a distraction to what you need to do for yourself. So you want to be that person who's really supportive of everyone around you, who's singing. Your pianists, don't forget your pianists. They're our lifeline. You want to treat them really, really well and give them the music ahead of time for things when you're in school and not at the last minute, so that they can be as prepared as they can be for you, for your performance or audition. So I would just say, be courteous, be a nice person. Let's say you've got two singers, they both really sing great. One's really hard to work with and difficult. The other one's really easy to work with, and they're both really great. Who do you think they're going to pick? They're going to pick the person who's really easy to work with and equally as talented.
And if I completely agree, and I would add to that, there's a really great podcast called Making Oprah. I encourage you all to listen to it. It's just fun to listen to how she became Oprah. And Oprah always says, run your own race. And I think that is so important for singers, because you will see people zooming past you. In this career, you won't always get the things that you want to get. And you might be looking at other people, other careers, but your ship can't leave without you, because it's your ship. So if you just focus on your race, your preparation, what you have to do, what you need to do, what brings you joy, you will find much more fulfillment.
Ms. Stone, I think you have the final question of the session.
Okay, well, I'll be quick. So, what are some ways to approach the digital portfolio or press kit or something like that when it comes to approaching the graduate process?
I don't know how I want to answer that one.
Well, so I think that it's good now to start thinking of your digital portfolio and start coming up with ideas. But at this stage in the audition process for graduate school, it probably won't be considered in the same way that it will be later on when you're out in the professional world. That being said, register your domain name
Right.
now before it gets taken.
That's correct.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Please join me in saying a special thank you to Carl and Penelope, our teaching artists. Thank you so much for being with us today for this terrific masterclass.
Thank you.
Speaking for Nashville Opera, I want to mention our great partners in these masterclasses: Tennessee State University, Dr. Robert Elliott, Head of Music Department, Fisk University, and the 105 Voices of History Choir. I also want to mention our sponsors that make this possible: the National Endowment for the Arts, Opera America Innovation Grant, and the Ann and Gordon Getty Foundation, South Arts, and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And as always, a special thanks to Patrick Daly, who is our project manager for this. Thank you all so much. We'll be back in January, I believe January the 13th, where we will have another masterclass. That'll be more on Italian repertory, and our teaching artist will be baritone Lester Lynch, who'll be with us. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you in January.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Hi, all. Thank you.
Thank